Okay, my friends, we've already been laughing and having fun. I have my I have my friend Angela Marick on the podcast today, and we're going to talk about all things money because, as I have mentioned in podcasts before, there's not a lot of people that want to talk about money, or it doesn't seem like it, or I haven't found a whole bunch of people that want to talk about money. So, do you want to share a little bit? You want to go by Ange or Angela?
I think Ange is more fun just
Okay.
because you're my friend and my friends call me Ange.
Okay.
Um, I think it's funny. I am part of a group in Marco Polo. I was like an ambassador for them. And I was asked to facilitate a group of business leaders and owners. And it's so fascinating. And we have women from all over, including Australia, in this small group. And I have been asking like, hey, do you guys want to talk about money? And everybody's like, I want to talk about it. And it feels like it's like the thing everybody, I don't know if everybody, but a lot of people want to talk about, but are afraid to, or don't feel like they have the safe spaces to actually say the things that they really think and believe and are scared or excited about. And I think creating the space that you're choosing to do and practicing that, like we're going to start to normalize this. In fact, I had a woman recently say to me, because we were talking about asking for money for, like, I have a nonprofit, as well as a for-profit business. And she's like, what if we start normalizing asking for money? And she
Mm-hmm.
has a nonprofit. I was like, well, that's a fascinating conversation as well. So I'm here for all the things and the magic of however it wants to flow today. And yeah.
Yeah. When you said I don't know if you said it or my brain went to it, but like
Yeah.
safe to have the conversation, right? Like
Ah,
I think a lot of us, for whatever reason, obviously you could probably stem it back to childhood and all the things, right? Culture, all the things. It's like it's not a safe space. It's not a safe space and it's not a nurturing, loving space to talk about money or to have money conversations.
yeah. So we're just completely
We're doing
creating,
it.
trailblazing our own space.
Yeah.
And I like to choose some really delicious statements about money and intentions, as I have beat the shit out of myself for decades about
Mm.
not being good with it. Go
Before
ahead.
you go there, I want to know, start us back at how did you used to view money or how did you grow up with money?
Sure. Yeah. So I really grew up like something, at least from my own connection, direct experience with money, is it flowed in and out very quickly. It never like stayed with me very long, right? Like just my own experience. When I get my allowance, I would go to Woolworths and go my like wet and wild nail polish, or like to Claire's and go get earrings, right? And that was it. I never really believed, and I'm frankly, the narrative that my parents taught, kind of, I was raised with, feeling like, you're not going to be good with me. You're not good
You're
managing
not good
money,
with money.
right? Yeah. And it's interesting. Like my brother was raised a little bit differently. I feel like they believed in him more in his
Mm.
ability to navigate money.
Maybe.
Um, and I felt like I was like the little baby bird that had to be protected. Like, oh, she's not going to be good with it, so we'll make sure. And I never felt like believed in like, hey, you're going to be able to generate a lot of wealth and you'll be good with it. Like
Yeah.
that narrative never never landed in my own awareness. I always thought everybody else. In fact, my brother, he's the one that went into finance, right, and worked for some big corporations, which is fascinating. But I looked at my parents as my dad was the gatekeeper of the money flow and my mom was the spender, is how it always felt. But they were very thoughtful and strategic. They did talk about it. They did have communication about it, which I really respected. But they were very thoughtful. They did not make, uh, I say they didn't make impulsive decisions, but I was like, wow, they always bought really amazing cars, including a Corvette, which I loved, and a boat. Like, so they used it for things that they really enjoyed, which happened to be modes of transportation, motorcycles, cars, and boats. And that was like how we got to experience it. But, and it just never felt like it was an overabundance of flow of it, but we always had enough and we always would spend it. Like my dad would never clip coupons for food. He's like, for food, we get what we want and we don't like hold back. Um, So that was kind of the things when I reflected upon like what that was like growing up.
It's like the word that comes to mind is like what they valued, right?
Mhm.
Which
Yeah, food.
I mean, it's totally
Food
right,
and
right?
cars.
Yeah, I mean, like me currently now, like I value experiences and travel, and so a large part of our money, right, goes to that. But if you were to
Yeah.
be like, do you care about like the type of clothes that you wear? It's like, I don't value that, right? And so it's not, it's not a, it's just interesting. It's like, it's not a cheap mentality. It's just like, where do I want to spend,
Yeah.
and what do I value? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, growing up, I had an entre still did well, he sold his business, but like had an entrepreneurial father, had business, made money, same kind of thing. Like I had it, lost it. Where does
Mm.
it go when we lose it, right? and then and then back again. And I remember so much of, it's interesting because the body remembers, right? Like I don't necessarily know if I remember specific things that he would say. I know like money is hard and you have to work really hard for it, but like there's definitely have been times when I have spent money in the past where my body has felt it. So it's
Mhm.
almost like the spending of it, the using of it was not a free flowing.
Yeah.
I've been kind of like contemplating that, because it's like the um yeah, the use of it, it's almost like I was talking to my brother yesterday about this, and it's like he had the idea of like, I'm just gonna go make all the money. And I was like, I'm gonna hoard and save as much as I can, and so it's just a very different uh
Reality. Yeah.
yeah, how we, like you were talking about your brother and you, and just how we have an experience and then how we cope with that
Mhm.
experience to keep us safe.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, as you're saying that, like I realized that I was raised one to like your in purpose is to get married and have kids young before the age of 30. And there was never like a dialogue about me actually like generating money and taking care of myself. It would always be like, you're going to have a
A
husband,
spouse will do that for
a
you.
spouse, right? And it was just kind of like, I don't even know if it was ever stated, but it kind of felt like it was just like understood, right?
Mhm.
In my parents, both my dad was an engineer, my mom was a teacher. So they had pensions, which, when you become an entrepreneur, you're like, what is that? Tell me more. Right? Like they had pensions, they had, guaranteed salary, right? There was
Yep.
such security that was very much um a very intense, like a purpose filled thing growing up, like just having security in that way. And so much was given, so much power, I think, was given to that.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, so I didn't even know that there was a whole other world to explore growing up. I just only saw what I saw, and that it needed to be secure, and you had to be responsible and thoughtful and really, really, really strategic and intentional.
Which is so fascinating because a lot of us, I mean, I
Mhm.
came from a job, right? And we believe and have been taught that our salary is so secure. Like I've talked to so many people, right, that are like,
Right.
"Oh, but I can't leave my job." It's like, or that complete trust in it, right?
Yeah.
Versus, um, versus they could come in at any time and decide we need to decrease pay, we need to let you go. Like it's such a collective belief, I think, that a lot of us have grown up with of like, okay, if you get a job, then that's a safe and secure thing, and you save for retirement, and that's a safe and secure
Yeah.
thing.
Until you realize it's all bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you grew up and you're like, okay, I'm supposed to get married, I'm supposed to have someone that takes care of me. When did the light bulb kind of flash on for you that
Today,
you're like, hey,
maybe
wait a
today.
second.
I'm just kidding. Today. Um,
Did you say
so
today?
today, yeah, light bulb's just going on. No, I think it's an ever evolving light bulb, right? So
Yes.
I remember, so I was on bed rest with both of my pregnancies, which by the way, I did have my children by 30. I had two.
You did? Good
I
job.
gave birth. Yeah. Yeah, I got married at 24, kid at 28 and 30. I just got right under the mark. But what's so interesting was when I went on bed rest with Carter, it was right when The Secret came out. And I was on bed rest for 5 months. And, which I was like used to, like, go, go, go. I'm also
Wait, were you working or like providing an income
yes.
during this
Not
time?
this,
Okay.
so here's what I was doing. I was
Okay.
so my husband Josh was working at a job where he was getting a pay and all the things. Like he was a W-2 employee, and I was a chiropractor, and I was working for somebody else. And of course, when you go on bed rest as a chiropractor, you can't do it remote. So I stopped working, but I started reading about The Secret, and I was like, wait, you mean I could have dreams beyond what I've already created? And I started actually imagining that I might have my own business. And I'd always worked for somebody else because I just didn't feel ready. And I love that. When I became a chiropractor in 2003, I knew I wasn't ready to like go out and just open my practice. I had no model, nobody around me close to me was an entrepreneur. And frankly, I was like, I also want to like trust myself. Like, what happens if you get like some weird case and maybe I won't know how to handle it, whatever. So I learned in that, some of my earlier experiences of the things to do and not to do. And so anyway, I was on bed rest, and I read about The Secret, and I was like, what is this law of attraction? And what is all this? And it just started opening up my kind of my old paradigm, if you will, conditioning to another way of experimenting and experiencing. And it's funny, I remember, so I started actually working out of a friend's office. Once I got off bed rest, had the baby, and I had two little ones. And I realized very quickly I was just not designed to be a stay-at-home mom full time. Like I tried, I lost my mind almost. And my husband was like, "What do you need?" I'm like, "I need to go back to work part time so I can do both." And so I did, and so I built a practice from nothing outside of a friend. I was an independent contractor. And 2 years later, I hit the level that I had set out to, which is around 100 visits a week, that I was ready to actually open my own business. So in 2010, I opened my own business. Um, and it was so fascinating to me that this was possible, that I could create something like that. But I was also in the paradigm, if I don't work, I don't get paid.
Mm.
And at the end of that first year in practice, I ended up having right lower quadrant pain in my belly. And I knew instantly what it was. And of course, I ignored it and went to work. Because I'm like, if I don't work, I can't pay the bills. And like, there was such a scarcity, such a fear behind it. Right. And sure enough, I go to the doctor at lunchtime. They're like, you need to go to the hospital. It was appendicitis. It had actually ruptured. Thankfully, it did not spread
Septic.
throughout my entire intestine. I did not go septic. It walled off. So I was only out for 2 weeks instead of, it could have been months, or again, I could have died, right? Yet in my mind, I was like, but I was justified. I had to push it because I had to make money and I was responsible. And I see this over and over and over again, right? And we don't know any better. Like part of us, like, you just have to be like, have a little compassion, right? Like, oh, you're so cute. You're like a new entrepreneur and you don't know that. You don't know what you don't know. So anyhow, so I went through that experience, and it was such a profound one because I realized, oh my gosh, like, why are we doing this? Like, it wasn't like we were living paycheck to paycheck. Our bills were being paid. My husband was making more money than me at that time anyway. Right. And my business I had already paid back all the loans I had taken out in I had a small line of credit. I had paid it back within 6 months. Like, it was in the black. I was able to pay payroll always while I had this practice. So it was just such an interesting thing how, like, even all the evidence is still in front of us. I call it amnesia. I think we have abundance amnesia over and over again. And I have been so guilty of that.
Yes. And it's so fascinating because I wrote down, like we're in this like survival hustle. I,
Right.
I want to talk about hustle, but in a different way, but
Mhm.
like survival and stressing. And like, I believe like that's what our nervous systems are used to. And so until we can get to that place of like, oh, okay, like actually like slowing down. Here's the other thing I think too, like you and I are both generators. And
Mhm.
like, I think we've been so trained to like act like manifestors and like just go out there, make it happen and like do the thing and like,
Knock it off.
forge ahead,
Well, that's where my appendicitis came from. I tried to be a manifester and I just should have just knocked it off.
But like our bodies are telling us and how, I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, I have had several, health things that have come up and it's like we refuse to listen to them because of the almighty dollar.
Yeah. 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 And I know in my journey, it continued, for years. And my husband Josh was very much in that frugal mindset, like we don't spend money, and it was definitely in that like he would spend money on things like experiences, like so we took a trip to Europe, but that was a value of his, and we went to Greece. We actually did the original
Mm,
marathon in
mhm.
Greece. That was my last marathon, never again. But I can say I did it once. But the thing that is so interesting is witnessing. So life took me on a journey where one, I had that experience of that hustle and how it showed up in my body. And I witnessed Josh, how he was like, even when we went to go buy a bigger vehicle, we had two children, um, like my little Saturn Ion, my 2004 Saturn Ion, which I love that car, it was getting to the end of its rope, and it was time for us to maybe get a little bit bigger car and all the things. And I remember I went to the dealership and I was going to go get a Ford Explorer in 2011. And right when I was about to sign off on it, they're like, "Hey, I was getting the base model."
Mhm,
And they're like, "Hey, for $3,000 more, you can get four-wheel drive and a backup camera."
mhm,
And I remember calling Josh and like, "Hey, how about I
mhm.
get like this next level? It'll be safer and all the things." To which, God love him, he said, "If you need four-wheel drive, you shouldn't be driving. You shouldn't be driving in those conditions. And if you get a backup camera, you're not going to be as safe as you could be because you're going to rely on it too much." And he said no. And at that time, I just wanted to please him and not make him upset, because I already knew he was already struggling with us buying this car to begin with. It was a $28,000 base model in 2011, and we literally had the money sitting in an account
Yeah,
and then some, right?
yeah, yep.
And we still didn't do that. And it was just such an interesting thing of like how that shows up, how what we discover. Like it was safer for him to not get it than for to have the safety features.
Mhm,
Right? It was
mhm,
just and it was just an interesting dialogue, but it's always interesting seeing the people that are in our life, right, to reflect back these stories about money. And
mhm.
he taught me so much.
Yeah. Um, the when you were I wanna go back real quick. When you had, like, paid up back all of the loans and everything
Mhm,
for your chiropractic business,
mhm.
w do you remember the energy that you were in? Was it like, "I have to hurry up and pay this back as quickly as I can," like, it was just very rushed? Like, was it proving energy too? Do you feel like it was proving energy,
Yeah.
or it was more so like, I can't have the debt"?
I think it was a little of both, but it was more for my perception of what I thought might stress Josh out.
Mm,
So when Josh and I got married, I was in chiropractic school, so I was accumulating debt, even though I was able to get half of my tuition paid for through scholarship, because
yep,
I worked really hard at the in that paradigm. Like if I just get straight A's, which I did, and
yep.
graduated top of my class, because I wanted to. That was proving where I was like, I want to prove that I'm still smart.
Mm,
um, then you get out into the real world and you're faced with the human. You're like, they don't care if you have straight A's or straight B's or straight C's, right? They want to care, can you help, right? And I'm
yeah,
like, anyway. But with that experience, I remember wanting to get rid of the debt, because I for sure had not we hadn't had much debt other than a mortgage, which we had actually paid off, or right before I started my practice. So we didn't have any debt at all except this line of credit, and I wanted to. And since we didn't need to live on my income, we lived on his income at that time, and I just put everything back towards the line of credit, and it was paid off within 6 months. And that felt amazing, but yet I think I was doing it from a people pleasing. Like I wanted to show Josh that it was safe for
yeah,
us to have this business and this debt, and that I could pay it off. And also so I could feel safe and not feeling like I was causing somebody else stress.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting because I can see how, because I have been Josh, right? Like I see you and my husband Jason and me and Josh. Like I used to be like, it would be stressful. It's like every time like some big amount of money we need to, even though we had it, even though it was okay, right? Like, and how he had made decisions not to do something because it would make me feel stressed, right?
It'll trigger
He
you.
can't make me feel stressed and also, right, like that elicit that emotion, and then he feels that too because I'm stressed. And
Yeah,
so how we want to please, really we're pleasing our partner so we don't feel that discomfort, right?
for sure. Yeah, and I being a nurturer, right? Like I would take
Mhm.
on the responsibility of your emotional experience.
Mm.
Right. So, and that goes back to my childhood and all the things, right? But of like, however he was emotionally, like and not that he had asked me to, but I had taken that on.
Yeah.
That is my fault.
Yep.
If you're stressed, I am fully responsible for all of it. I hadn't learned, the thought model. I hadn't learned a lot of the tools I learned through coaching and all the things until later, obviously. But I thought it was all of my fault. And I would
Mm.
take that pressure on. And I still remember Josh telling me at one point, he's like, Ange, I wish I would get hit by a bus so that I don't have all this pressure. And I say that like with full openness because I really think that my story with money and with Josh is profound. And I also feel that part of the legacy of our journey together is to help others see a different way and to connect with something that feels nourishing, that feels loving and supportive and honoring.
Mm.
And
Like my whole body just is like a little
yeah,
bit teary, a little bit of like chills from the sense of like, because I have found in most of my friends, there's that one person that has the, if you want to call it, they choose it, right? They take the brunt of the responsibility on from the financial standpoint, right? And then you have the other partner who I don't want to say goes along, but like very much is like, okay, they're stressed, so I don't want to like it's almost like this tiptoeing around, right? Because you
it's so
have
awkward.
yeah,
It's so awkward.
for both parties, right? Like
Yes.
because the party that feels that intense responsibility feels responsible for everything. Like it's a heavy, heavy weight. Like you're saying, like the pressure, like I remember what that pressure used to feel like, right? And then for the party that is like, well, I want to be able to get what I want. And like, I want to ask for what I want, but I feel bad every time I ask for what I want because it totally, stresses my partner out. Um, that doesn't feel good
Yep.
either.
No, but I think hmm. And then you get a bigger perspective,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So, so Josh, was a manifesting generator, and it was 2015, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And and I share this for so many reasons, was one, his cancer started in his solar plexus, which should have been his authority in his human design.
Yep.
And I didn't realize that till probably last year, 2 years ago. He passed away in 2016. It's been 7.5 years. And the other thing too, because we also don't talk about it, is grief is a really wildly awkward conversation. So money and grief. I mean, I feel like to
Let's
me
do it.
they're hand in hand. And yet in my mind it's sacred. So um the thing that was so beautiful with Josh, right, was at the end of his life, he had worked so hard. He worked at a job that he did not love, he was not passionate about, but he was passionate about me and our boys. That was always true. Like we were his value, even though he never let himself like fully feel free
Mm.
in his journey with his profession and with money. And at the end of his life, he found this profound faith in something greater than himself and he surrendered to it. And I don't have the words to describe the beauty of what I got to witness, but he gave me this beautiful gift of witnessing him in his journey and the legacy that he has left for me that I keep like has diamond like I feel like it's infinite diamonds that I'm always exploring and discovering. Um And one of those, which was a massive trigger, which has been a wild experience, was the life insurance money I received after he passed, which was in the amount of $600,000. And interestingly, for those that are in wealth management, that account has been labeled transfer on death, which has been a shitty name. I like that really needs to be redone, I think, in my mind. But I realized that account, that money account had become a word that just came through was like a noose at times because I felt like I couldn't trust myself with it. I felt like it was death money. Like if I had just made more money when he was alive, maybe he would have been still be alive. And that's a really effed up way to think about it, right? And I wasn't conscious of this until last year. And really like put so much power and pressure in this account. And then this past year I've remarried with this wonderful man named Paul, and he has a totally different money journey, and it has been totally reimagined and walked through in such an interesting way. But we decided to build a house in Kenya, which that's a whole other story. But in Kenya, yes, Kenya, Africa, like not down the street. I live in Pennsylvania. And I realized when I said yes to this project, I was going to be walking through all of what my money nightmares, right? And what are we going to use? And is this being responsible? As we're building a house in another country that we are not physically present to watch it, which by the way, has been building practices in Kenya are wildly different than US. And everybody has a different vision of what this home was going to look like. And what's so interesting is I knew when I said yes to this project, it was going to help me heal and transcend some of my money stories. And I knew we were probably going to utilize this account either to borrow against or to alchemize it into a physical home structure, which is currently happening, but we're actually able to still, anyway. So it's been a intentional journey that I was at least somewhat aware that it was going to trigger all of my things and what I made money mean, what I made that account mean, about my own feelings, and really practicing and walking through my own healing journey with money and with my late husband, as well as this account and what it has represented in grief and money and love.
Such a, like, I look at it from such a beautiful thing, right? Like, such a beautiful, like, what a gift that he's been able to give. And I know that, you have had thoughts around like the guilt, right? And
So
like
much.
but the gift, right? It's like the gift that keeps on giving because of what you said, alchemizing. Like, I love that. It's like what continues and will continue to happen in that house and in Kenya and all of the things because of that. Um, it's so beautiful.
It really is. I think that's one of the reasons why, I started going for my private pilot's license, was just taking that bird's eye view to really put it into perspective, right? And really using the metaphor of that, like, okay, all these things that we get all caught up on the ground and it feels heavy and all this stuff. And then, we're able to lift this like structure, this metal structure into the air and easily, and to be able to take another perspective and a viewpoint, it has been such a beautiful process that I like, another gift, another layer that I've been able to access that allows to really heal and rewrite the narrative and the energetic vibration of this experience and what's being called in now.
Yeah. When you think about or you feel money and you use money and receive money, and like, how do you view it, and how does it feel for you now versus how it used to feel?
Yeah, well, this past year it's been really triggering because my current husband, Paul, was a teacher, and he decided to leave teaching to support me in whatever journey I'm feeling called into. And so our quote safe money also went away, right? Like that regular influx. And and here we're building this house that, oh, here's another thing that we need to send money for. Oh, wait, here's another thing. Of course, none of it was anticipated, right? And yet it was, right? And and so I mean, every time I was using a credit card like this past year, like it felt like a knife in my heart. Like I'm doing it wrong. I'm failing. I shouldn't be. I'm being so irresponsible. I felt really unsafe with money a lot this year.
Mm.
And most recently, I am now I'm reframing the narrative around money. So I wrote down recently the sentence that I've been loving for me is money nourishes me.
Mhm.
And money is also a sacred teacher.
Mhm.
Um, and and I'm feeling that nourishment from it
Mhm.
and the wonder as
Mhm.
well as the mystery. So I just recently, so I sold my chiropractic practice a few years ago. So because we just to, long story, very short, Cliff Notes version, Paul and I got married. He had a child. I had my two. We had blending a family, which I was a value of mine that our family was going to. I said like succeed, but it was going to be a family.
Connect. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were connecting, and we rebuilt it, and I think we nailed it. We have 3 boys that are moving forward in life in their own way, and it has been challenging and beautiful and all the things. And that was a value of mine. And I didn't realize it so much, but I sold my practice so I could be more present at home. And I started coaching, which was really my healing process. And then just recently I started practicing chiropractic again once a
Mhm.
week, not from a hustle. Hey, let's see how many visits we can pack in one day, which at one point I think I saw as many as 93 people in a day, which sounds horrifying to my body right now. And now it's like, ooh, 8 people, and it feels delicious, and just like loving each person. And it's a very different experience now. But with that, I realized, so I'm getting a paycheck again. And so I
Mm.
realized the first paycheck, I was like starting to judge it. Like, I shouldn't need a paycheck, right? Like, I've had enough of these resources. It should all be enough, right? And but I realized, like, what if money's here to nourish me? And what if I just let my husband pick up the paycheck and deposit it? And I don't need to really know the number right now, just because I'm still healing some of the conditioning, what I make it mean, what I don't make it mean. And so I've been experimenting with money. So that's been coming through. And this
Mhm.
past week I had a birthday, and I on Facebook it has like, hey, do a fundraiser if you want for your birthday. Well, I started a nonprofit last year because I decided to co-create a school in Kenya because why not? And we have been using our resources to fund the school for a significant part of it. And I was like, well, what if we just do the fundraiser? And Facebook suggested $200. I'm like, how about $500 as a goal? Why not? Within 2 days, it was $700 that were donated. And then Facebook just said, oh, we have a giving fund. Here's $225 grant that I
That's
didn't even know
amazing.
existed. Right. So literally $1,000 just came through. And then a family member's like, hey, here's a $500 check for the school. So for the first time ever, all the expenses to run our school in Kenya for 1 month is covered because I decided to experiment.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm releasing as I'm healing, right? I'm like letting money be my healer and my teacher, is like letting go of the attachment of what I needed to identify with in order to feel safe, in order to feel a certain way, in order to, be who I am in the world, versus I get to experiment with money.
Yeah. I know it's always has felt like you have used words that I now feel with money, right? Like it
Mm,
used to be this, like, to me, it was like high stakes, right? Like it's
right.
a
Oh.
it's a big thing, right? Like, like don't waste it, don't mess it up. If you mess up something, if you take a class and you don't do it, now you've wasted the money, or you know, you tried a food and you didn't like it and you didn't eat it all. So now, that's just like, it was like everything felt very, yeah, high stakes is the only word that comes to
Yeah.
mind, that, versus like, you know, I don't think my nervous system is truly at the point of like where it's like my breath, where like I never even doubt it. But for sure, it's come a long way from like that, like you know?
Right. That's why we're talking about it in a
Yeah.
way that we're not triggered, right?
Yeah. But the experimentation, right? Like, what if we just, I love that because it's like, what else do we put such heavy, like sometimes I'm like, money, I'm so sorry for the way that I treated you, because it was,
Well, I think we
it's like
put heaviness, whether
yeah,
it's
I put so
role.
much responsibility on you that
So
you didn't.
as a mom,
Yeah.
as a wife, right? I think those things, I know as a chiropractor, I did at times, right? Like, oh my God, somebody felt worse after an adjustment. It's all my fault. Not to
Yeah.
mention, hey, this human came to you for whatever. I think those things are really important to recognize where we put so much high stakes, you say. Like it's like if you there's only one path, and if you don't do it right, your guardrails are shame and guilt.
Yeah.
You're like,
And I mean,
no,
yeah.
bullshit.
And if you mentioned The Secret, and, for those of you that are listening, like, all the law of attraction, all of it, right? Like,
Mhm.
if we're in that state of like, it's like,
Right. We're gonna create more of it.
what can come in? What can be allowed? Because, and I think our minds want to, which comes back to safety, right? Like, our minds want to know where it's going to come from because we're so, uh, oh, that's probably what we've done, right? Like, we're so conditioned in that way versus doing what we love to do, playing with it. Let's just see what happens.
Right.
Like, and we forget that, like, we're the ones that created the whole money thing in the first place, right? Like,
We totally did. In fact, I wanted to share this. I'm actually
okay,
reading this book right now. Have you heard of
what
it?
busting
Called
loose?
Busting Loose from the
No.
Money Game
Mm-mm.
and Mind Blowing Strategies. Nah, well, it's a process for strategies. Sometimes is a little triggering for me still. Um, but mind blowing strategies or a process for changing the rules of a game that you can't win. And I love this so much because it's talking. Robert Scheinfeld. He really talks about everything's a hologram. If it's all an illusion,
Yeah.
like the numbers in the bank, like all we do is we just attach our egoic conditioning, right? And most oftentimes it's unconscious, right? So, for a little while, I was like, hey, Paul, to my husband, I'm like, hey, can you handle some of the things in the bank accounts and all that stuff? Because right now it's triggering me. It's like hundreds of thousands of dollars have gone out the door to Kenya for this house that, we're also hoping to rent at some point. It will, imagining it's generating some sort of resource flow. But yet on the other side of it too is like, okay, I've also played with what if like literally the house imploded and all of that money went out, and I realized I'm like, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Right. But where am I not okay? And realize, and then so something else I'm also playing with too is I am so turned on by the fact of being a sugar mama and my husband being a trophy husband. And we say this with such playfulness because my husband, because I always am like, are you sure? Like, do you feel emasculinated? Like all the things. He's like, he's told me this ever since we got married 5-6 years ago. He's like, Ange, I would love to be a trophy husband. He's like, I'm totally cool. Like, I love puttering around the house. I love, and it's so interesting. So we've gone through this whole process because at first I was like, well, if you're a trophy, like, what's your purpose? Like all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And what has been so freaking fun, apparently loves going out and marketing me, which is really weird, right? And like my whole like, oh, I don't want to be whatever. And he goes out and he talks about our school in Kenya. He goes out, talks about coaching and the things, the spaces that we offer. And it's so interesting because he loves it.
Mhm.
And I think too, when we get to like reimagine all of the quote triggering statements, should or shouldn't, in order to be a man in the world or a woman in the world, you have
Mm.
to dot, dot, dot.
Mhm.
Paul and I have been just, and I know you and Jason too,
Yeah.
right? Like we've just been exploring what if it's really all an illusion, what are we actually here for? Right? Like
Yeah.
let's really connect to the passion. And
And what
that
do we actually
weekend,
want, right? Like,
to,
do
yeah.
you actually want to, like, he probably, like you say, he loves to do that, right? Versus these ideas that we have in our head that, like, it's supposed to look like this and I'm supposed to follow it this way.
It looks nothing like it. And it's amazing and terrifying, right?
Yeah. And, the thing, you said something about the um, money in the bank account, like I read somewhere, I don't know if it was what book it was, but they were talking about how anywhere between like 4 to 8% of actual physical money, which we know it's not even backed by the gold standard anymore, right? It's like, but the
It's a
actual
gold standard.
physical money, like if everyone wanted to go to the bank and get their money today, only 4 to 8% of the total amount of money that is circulating all around, we would be able to get. And so it's like when you actually think about that, like the $100, just from easy math, the $100 that's in our bank account, we can only truly access $4 or $8 of it. Like the rest is literally
Right.
just,
And even that's just in
yeah,
our egoic mind thinking the 8% is safe because there's a gold backing somewhere as if gold
yeah,
is safe,
no,
right?
no, yeah,
And that's only
exactly.
based on like a collective agreed upon standard.
Yep, yep. And so it's just fascinating to how much I was trying to think like, okay, what else do we put so much pressure on
Mhm.
like we do with money? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. Huh? What did you say?
Yeah, no, I said, yeah, I was agreeing with you.
Yeah, like I don't know if there's not another thing that comes to mind that we like heavily weight as much with as we do with money, you know?
Yeah. So I think it depends also maybe on the way we were raised. I know
Yep.
for me, marriage was the
Mhm.
most important thing.
Mm.
Get married, you stay married for the rest of your life,
You don't get
which
a choice. We don't get to choose every day. Okay.
nope, nope, nope. And that is your number one. Like you have been successful. Again, this is the
Is
paradigm
that a
I was raised
faith-based
in.
thing? Like, did you grow up
It wasn't
faith-based
fate.
wise?
I mean, I grew
No?
up in a Christian environment,
Uh-huh.
but it wasn't. It was like, no, this is our
That's
value.
just okay.
You get married and you make that commitment for life. And if you, and there's no option.
I feel a lot of pressure right now.
Yeah, right. So that was, so I was raised with a lot of specific rules. So money was just was one of the things,
Yeah.
right? So but that was a big one. Um, and it's so interesting. So when I remarried, what happens when your spouse dies, right? Like that was not something we talked about growing up. Like I know divorce wasn't an option. Well, what if they die at 40 and you still have a lot more life ahead of you, right? And interestingly, my current husband, is divorced. And it was so fascinating when he came into my life. He was actually separated at the time. He wasn't officially divorced yet. He was going through the process. But I remember like in my mind, like I was raised that you don't ever get divorced. How do I reconcile that as I'm dating somebody, right? Who's doing something that wasn't quote allowed, or it was actually judged as not good enough, right? Like,
Mm.
you clearly didn't do something right or try hard enough if you had to get divorced, right? Again, just the paradigm
That's
as
just
I've
what,
understood it.
yep.
I'm not
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 it's
trying
not
to
what you believe, it's just
right.
what you were taught. Yep.
Well, and
Or
unconsciously, it was in my belief system. In
not
fact,
currently. It's not what you currently
oh
believe,
gosh,
but it is what you
no,
used to maybe
I
believe
used
because
to
that's
believe
what you
that.
were taught. Yeah.
And thankfully, to Paul's credit, I was like, hey, I'm struggling with this because I grew up with this belief that, you know, you should never get divorced. If you're widowed, that's okay, but divorce for sure not. Right. And I was like, and I really want to let this go. And to Paul's credit, he's like, okay, let's talk about it. And it was so beautiful because it was a safe space to be like, oh my gosh, I'm realizing I have a judgment about it. And I know that that's not true. And I don't want to keep it in my wheelhouse anymore. And it was so cool because then I came to a place I'm like, oh my gosh, people that get divorced, like, wow, how brave, how
Mhm.
courageous, like
Mhm.
all the things. Like I came to see it from such a beautiful, loving, honoring perspective
Mhm.
that I didn't know was available. And I think just like money as well, right? Like, versus like I was raised, if you have too much, you clearly probably don't have a good, you've sacrificed your marriage and your family for the money.
It's almost like this or that, right? It's
It's
not like
yeah,
and,
either or
right?
versus
Yep.
and you and
Yeah.
I are both like, I think it's and. What does this and life look like?
Yeah. Was
Fucking
there
awesome.
was there a point in time for you that you realized that because I know that Josh used to handle the money more so, but was there a point in time?
Interestingly, actually, I did.
Oh, I thought you said that he was like, oh, he just would
Hmm.
be really stressed about it, but you were the
Yes.
one that like did the
But
money.
I was the
Okay.
one who actually paid all the bills and I put things into like I put money into our money market and saved it and all the things.
So would
Anyway,
he just ask you questions and then based on those answers, he would feel stressed? Because if he wasn't the one doing it, would you sit down and you would have conversations about it? Or he would just like any type of like big spending, it would just be like, oh, it's stressful.
yeah, all of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so was there a point in time that you thought that there was a certain amount of money that you would have that would either one make you feel safe or two would relieve the pressure from Josh?
I love that question. So I remember Josh and I sitting down to have a conversation when we were before I got pregnant and we moved into our house. And it was in 2003. I had just graduated chiropractic school, started a job in an office, and we sat down and we're like, what kind of life do we want to have and how much money do we need to have? And the number at that time was $3 million. Weirdly, not weirdly, that was about how much money, quote, in the net worth assets I had after he passed, or a year after, because I sold my
Yeah.
practice. So weird, anyway, it was 3.2 is I think what I came to. And I laugh now because I'm like, it doesn't matter. Right. And that number has changed and fluctuated. It's contracted some as all the things. Um, And I love that question so much because I realized that that was like, quote, the high point, if you will. And it was like we're doing so much to try to protect it and stressing
Mm.
so much to protect that number, like as if his legacy was tied up in that number versus living the most extraordinary free life, which is what Paul and I have consciously been working and practicing and enjoying. And I know you and Jason have in your own beautiful way. If that's when it happened.
Yeah.
And then this house and I realized like what this account, this transfer on death account,
Mm.
like what if we just liquidated all of it and we would just, erase all of the quote, the borrowing against it, if you will.
Mhm.
And I talked to our financial advisor about it and she's like, well, you can do that, but why would you want to? You could actually use that in a different way. And she showed another strategy. I love her. She's like my financial advisor. She's like, I want to have a presentation of like helping women to spend money without feeling guilt. I'm like, I
Yeah.
love that. I think if every financial advisor should do that.
Yeah.
But it was such a beautiful awareness of like in my mind, I'm like, no, I have to get rid of all the debt. I have to be all the things to feel safe. And then I realized, no,
Yeah.
that safety money's like, no, I am not your savior.
Yeah. It's like money's like, you put a lot of
You knock it
responsibility
off.
on
Stop
me.
putting all that pressure. It's freaking stupid. We're here to
Yeah.
play.
Yeah.
Go play. Go have freaking fun. Go fly an airplane.
Yeah. And what's fascinating is I think that coming from the financial industry and some of the financial industry still, it's like this idea of like this accumulation and we're going to get to this point. And I've really been thinking about this more lately of like generators, retirement, and health. Because if we don't have things to do, if we don't have things to, you know, like we work because we love to do things, right? And we don't have that. What's the point of having all of the money, right? We're not we're not able to enjoy it. And this idea that like it's always going to go up, 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 right? Like where is this currency or conduit is the word that comes to mind, like this
Mhm.
inflow, outflow of how we use our money versus it should continue to increase and it needs to always
And
be at,
predictably.
yeah,
Yes.
at a
It always
higher
has to
number.
be growing. That net worth has to always be growing. Otherwise, you're effed it all up. And here's what I think in this moment. It's there just to teach us. It's really
Mhm.
there just to love us. It's really there
I
in
got full body chills. It's
passion to like, hey, let's go have some fun. Right. So like my husband now, Paul's like, hey, I think I want to go and get my pilot's license. I'm like, okay, how about, and it requires obviously, we do probably some resources. And I'm like, okay, what if we just like get sponsors? Maybe somebody might want to sponsor that part of that and be a part of my dream of like bringing aviation to our school in Kenya, and maybe they want to be a partner of that and a collaboration, and that the sponsorship will be a part of it. Everybody wins. It's an and there is no either or, no win lose.
Yeah.
It just grows and expands. But the money's gonna, like, just like our weight, right? Like after Thanksgiving, it went up, and then maybe a few days, like a week later, or January, when everybody goes back to the gym, then it goes down a little bit, then it goes back, like all the things. And what if we don't, like, what if today our weight, as an example, because
Yeah.
that could be
Yep.
really triggering. What if the weight, and this is something I've been practicing, what if the weight that we are today is perfect
Yep.
for our soul's experience in our human body? What if the money we have right now is so fucking perfect for the experience our soul is curated for us to have in this life?
Yeah.
And maybe we just get to let go and have some freaking fun.
That's the ticket right there, right?
Done. Game
Because
over.
why are we
Same game
saving
that
all of the
started.
money to begin with? Like, let's get
It's
down to the
not
nitty
coming
gritty.
with us to the other side.
But we are saving it, right? Because at some point we want to go have some fun. So why don't we just go have some fun right now? And that doesn't mean, we're not saying like, okay, blow it all and all of the things, right?
Oh,
And also, why aren't we having fun right now? Why are we delaying satisfaction
sure.
and
I think it's
enjoyment?
amazing, and it's so interesting. As much as I feel I have judged myself for, quote, spending so much money, I'm like, oh my gosh, we have like our retirement accounts that are beautifully in their space. And again, that's all an illusion too. But I have
Yeah.
that. We had Paul or Josh and I have made 529s for the kids. So my
Yep.
oldest is going to college now, and I'm like, I don't worry about it. I'm like, I have a fund, and if that fund gets depleted, the kids are responsible, and
Yeah.
there's a beautiful amount in there. So I am so grateful for, by the way, this conversation. And like being able to have this like openness and the freedom to talk about the things that frankly just people are afraid to, and it feels so freeing and joy filled.
Why do you think people are afraid to talk about it?
Yeah.
Have you been in the past afraid to talk about it? And what was,
Sure.
I mean, we can't like, I guess project why other people, but like, what was
Yeah.
your reason? And I'll share my reason.
Yeah.
And I think like, I mean, I think that's a lot of us, right? Like,
Right. um I believe it's like for women, it's like going to the gynecologist, right? And you're like, I don't want to do that and have to, and they're always like, scooch closer. And ladies, you're going to understand this reference. Men, maybe not. They're like, hey, relax your legs. You don't want to relax your legs. I'm just saying. I feel like it's very similar to that experience, right?
oh my gosh, I love that.
Mhm. So I think that's part of it, right? And so when we start to normalize it in your nervous system, and you find out you don't die in the process, it actually starts to evolve.
We just don't want to look in the mirror, right? Like we don't want to
Mm.
face the facts, and also having so much compassion for ourselves, right? Like coming from that place of like, it's
Yeah.
okay, right? Like it's okay that I'm scared, but I'm willing to do it anyways, right? It's like, it's the same thing
Yeah.
with gynecologists. Like I'm willing to take care of my health, and it's not the
Right.
most, in the beginning, it's not the most fun, right?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's something that I've been learning over and over again, and I know you have too. Is like I'm willing to face the things that go bump in the dark in my own brain, so that I can help make a difference in the world. Because I feel this in my soul, and I feel from the legacy of Josh. I'm here to live a life of freedom and an extraordinary and nourishing life, and be the invitation energetically for others to do in their own sacred path.
Yeah. It's the
And I
willingness. I've always said, like, we need to talk about willingness and courage, because those are the two. I don't know if those are emotions, right? But like, it's
Yeah,
that willingness and that courage, because it
yeah.
doesn't feel good in the beginning, right? But like, are we willing?
Hell yeah. And
Mm,
that's why we're talking about it.
so good. Okay. Thank you, my
Thank
friend.
you, my friend.